So now I ask Sára Erzsébet Timár to come to the stage, and there you go.
Good afternoon. My name is Sára Timár, and I would like to present my project about Hungarian cultural houses. When we start to work on something, I think it is always interesting to go after what is our personal connection to the topic. So I try to recall the first time I visited a culture house. It was not easy to remember, but I think it was around 1994 when I was 6, 7 years old. And we visited countryside town with my father. He ran folk dance classes to young people, and I watched him teaching. And this story is important for me in this case because I can still remember the place where we were. I can still remember the red stage curtains, the stone floor, the flickering neon lights, the carpeted hallway, and also the strong tobacco smell around. At this time, I spent a lot of time in culture houses, but I think a lot of people in Hungary have these kinds of memories. But of course, in the beginning of the 90s, when I was a child, I had no idea what was the regime change. I did not understand socialism or how a social realist building should look like. But I was getting older, I felt that the cultural houses represent a special word, a word that was not always welcoming, at least for me. But maybe because I spent there that much time, or maybe it was the sense of nostalgia, but this feeling of dislike formed into a kind of attachment in me, and these places started to really interest me. But what a cultural house exactly is. People often think that this institutional network is a product of socialism, but actually it is not, because there were reading clubs, workers' homes, culture clubs in Hungary, in the turn of the 19th century also. However, the post-communist takeover completely changed the institutional framework, and they started to build new buildings as well. From this point, the function of the buildings was considered as a place for culture spreading, cultural leisure, and of the distribution of the ideas of Marxism-Leninism, of course. These places were viewed as the basic institutions of public education. Of course, in the social practice, this conception was not always effective. After the revolution of 1956, cultural houses started to give place to pop culture, for discos, for example, also to concerts of renitent bands, even to avant-garde theatrical pieces and performances, but of course only in the tolerated classification. After the regime change, many people did not understand the role of cultural houses. These places were seen as the remains of socialism and as outdated institutions. Some people even looked for the demolishing of the buildings. But whatever they thought or wanted, the network of the cultural houses finally remained here for us, even if some of the buildings had already been closed by now. Last year, I decided to build a project on this topic as a photographer because I wanted to discover the actual condition of the cultural houses in Hungary. I have tried to reach places from different parts of the country, and I tried also to collect information, stories, interviews, old photos from the directors and also from people who spent time there. I started to work around Budapest, so in the capital's institutions, but after I wanted to also reach small villages like Aka, for example, which is a little small village with only 200 residents, and also places more far. Fortunately, I had a theoretical background in my mind, because several years ago, for my history major diploma, I made a research about one cultural house from Budapest in the 70s. This research really helped me, even today, to understand better these places. During this diploma work, I watched the video project of Andreas Fogarasi for the Venice Biennale from 2007, which presents 5 cultural houses from Budapest and raises questions about the role of these institutions in society after the regime change. This work really inspired me because after all of this historical, theoretical work, I really wanted to know what's happening today with these places, not only in Budapest and his work, but mostly at the countryside. So I have started to work on it. When the past lives in our present in a certain way, it always raises questions and causes interesting situations. I believe that in the case of the cultural houses, this is still accurate today. What interests me the most is that lots of people's cultural activity and their recreation happen in these places. In these places where the scenery, what we see, often reminds us the world of the past decades and its concept about the relation between culture and society. Different time layers have been piling up in these buildings because the users of the houses are continuously contributing to and taking away something from the total picture. What were the aspects on the selection of the visited places? Well, before a trip, I always make a quick search about the buildings on the internet, on Facebook, or in Facebook. And if I find something interesting, a small detail, a special room, or a theater studio, what inspires me, or an event, I ask permission from the institution and I go there. But according to statistics from last year, today there are about 3,000 institutions, what we call culture house in Hungary. So there are many small local places which are not well known or not well documented on the internet. But sometimes this place is the most interesting. So the success of a trip is often just a question of chance. Every building can be interesting in some way, but I'm searching for those cultural houses which have a special atmosphere. I mean, those places which still keeping in some way the cultural heritage of the past. The heritage what these places will probably lose with time, or they are losing it now. However, I have to notice that not all of the Hungarian cultural centers are in this condition. We have institutions which have completely renovated and transformed in the last years. This series is not about that every culture house look like that in Hungary. It's about that we have still many buildings which keep this special atmosphere, even in 2016. This is the time of transformation of this institutional network. This process sometimes causes tension, absurd situations, humor, and even beauty, I guess. As the historian Zsolt K. Horváth wrote in one of his studies, cultural houses are visual signals in the social place, documents of an era. This statement is still true, I think, sometimes so much that we can even read the site itself. So, in this project, I wanted to frame those attributes which recall in us the collective image of the cultural houses in Hungary. By continuing the work in the second part, I wanted to emphasize more the presence of human in different ways. The traces of people in the space, on the furnitures, paints, decorations, or in any other ways. I have tried to participate some events because I wanted to also focus on the physical appearance of human. I found really exciting that what people do with these places. In these institutions, we can find extremely different kinds of cultural activity, from the high culture to the second-hand clothing market. And these events work naturally next to each other on the same buildings. Seemingly, the visitors are unaware of this diversity. At the end of the project, I would like to give all of it a book form, because I think that this form, in this form, more places can be, more cultural houses can be shown next to each other, given its own nature. I would like to demonstrate it with this dummy, book dummy. This is a sketch. And it can be a possible form of the book. My objective is to publish my study, what I wrote on this topic, and to put next to the photos. Because I'm going to emphasize two perspectives in this book, the historical and the photographical point of view, as I did it during my work so far. Because I think that the text and the documents can help to give the series a good context. So I started this work because I think that the transformation of our cultural houses is a cultural, historical milestone, and it is good to understand that now we can still witness a slow but final closing of an era. Thank you very much.
Any questions?
I got a question related to the current moment, like right now, when you completed the work, or you are in this level that you already have been working for some time with the work. Do you think it's more for you like a historical, anthropological, even study, or something that it has a broader meaning? Do you see some broader metaphor in the work? Or it's very simply, is it the work about cultural houses, or it's something more? Do you see some broader metaphor in the work?
Magyarul mondom, ha az úgy jó. I answer it in Hungarian, if it's possible, sorry. Szóval az a fontos ebben az egészben, hogy ez a fajta vizualitás, amit én itt bemutatok, ez egyfajta metafóraként él tovább. Tehát átalakulóban vannak ezek a helyek, ahogy elmondtam, és ezek a hangulati, vizuális képi játékok, amik a fotókon szerepelnek, ez egy ilyen folyamatosan eltűnő világ, és igen, kiragadom, mondhatjuk úgy, hogy szinte már kicsit ki is emelem a tényleges látványból és valóságból. Tehát ilyen értelemben mondhatjuk, hogy már szinte metaforikus, de valóban megtaláljuk ezeket a helyeket így ebben a formában, de én azon dolgoztam végig, hogy valahogy ezt ki tudjam emelni, ezt az eltűnőben lévő világot, és egyes helyeken sokkal jobban erősíteni ennek a hangulatát.
Thank you very much. Thank you.